It's always a pleasure to come back to UUCDC and see such warm and familiar faces and to enjoy the richness of the music here. I thank you for welcoming me back. The reading I'd like to share with you comes from the writing of the Reverend Ralph Helverson. Deep in ourselves resides the religious impulse. Out of the passions of our clay, it rises. We have religion when we stop deluding ourselves that we are self-sufficient, self-sustaining, or self-derived. We have religion when we hold some hope beyond the present, some self-respect beyond our failures. We have religion when our hearts are capable of leaping up at beauty, when our nerves are edged by some dream in our heart. We have religion when we have an abiding gratitude for all that we have received. We have religion when we look upon people with all their failings and still find in them good. When we look beyond people to the grandeur in nature and to the purpose in our own heart. We have religion when we have done all that we can, and then, in confidence, entrust ourselves to the life that is larger than ourselves. I work with a lot of couples who are planning to be married. The word gets around that Unitarian Universalist ministers are comfortable marrying couples who are not necessarily members of their congregation, not necessarily churched people. And so we get these calls, and it's always interesting to meet with them and learn about their lives. And despite the fact that they're not members of a congregation anywhere and they don't have a church home of their own, when it comes time for their wedding, they want a minister. And they often say to me, well, we're spiritual, we're just not religious. I'm sure you've all heard that phrase, spiritual but not religious. Many of you may have used it to describe yourself at one time or another. I learned this past summer that it is an official box you can check on Match.com. I was not on there looking, so don't alarm my spouse. This came up in a conversation with a friend. Now, we could spend the whole morning arguing. And Unitarian Universalists love to argue semantics, especially on religious language. So we could spend the whole morning arguing about the definitions of the words religious and spiritual. But we're not going to do that. Because I'm the one who has the pulpit right now. So I get to tell you what I think they mean. I'm reminded a bit of that piece in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, when poor Alice winds up in the bewildering conversation with Humpty Dumpty. And one of my favorite lines, when I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. So this morning, I'm asking you to just go with me as I define these terms and understand that that's how I'm using them. You don't have to agree with my definitions, but at least for the next 20 minutes, we'll be on the same page. Now, my experience has been that most people tend to use the word spiritual to describe an individual, personal, inward journey. We talk about our spiritual lives, sort of the inner workings of our life. Religion, on the other hand, tends to connote a more structured, organized, communal experience, a religious community. And that's how I'm choosing to use the words this morning. Now, for many people, their religion provides the framework within which they then develop and explore and experience their spiritual life. Often the word religion, and Kelly certainly referred to this in her personal statement, the word religion can get equated with these thoughts about rigidity and dogma and religious conservatism, all the things of which Unitarian Universalists tend to be skeptical. But I question why we allow the conservative and rigid and dogmatic voices to define the word religion, to define what it means to be religious people. Because while spiritual but not religious can be perfectly sufficient for an individual personal journey, Unitarian Universalism is, dare I say it, a religion. We are a liberal religious movement. And if a religious movement can't be comfortable identifying itself as religious, then it's lost a lot of its power. So I want to share with you some words from A. Powell Davies. A. Powell Davies was a great Unitarian preacher back in the 40s and 50s. He was the minister of All Souls Unitarian Church down in Washington, D.C., and it was largely the success of that church under his leadership and his preaching that caused so many smaller churches to spring up around the Beltway, all offshoots of the mother church. So this is A. Powell Davies. The religion that says freedom, freedom from ignorance and false belief, freedom from spurious claims and bitter prejudices, freedom to seek the truth, both old and new, and freedom to follow it. Freedom from the hates and greeds that divide humankind and spill the blood of every generation. Freedom for honest thought. Freedom for equal justice. Freedom to seek the true, the good, and the beautiful. The religion that says humankind is not divided except by ignorance and prejudice and hate. The religion that sees humankind as naturally one and waiting to be spiritually united. The religion that proclaims an end to all exclusions and declares a brother and sisterhood unbounded. The religion that knows that we shall never find the fullness of the wonder and glory of life until we are ready to share it. That we shall never have hearts big enough for the love of God until we have made them big enough for the worldwide love of one another. And then he goes on and says, as you have listened to me, have you thought perchance that this is your religion? If you have, do not congratulate yourself. Stop long enough to recollect the miseries of the world you live in, the fearful cruelties, the enmities, the hate, the bitter prejudices, the need of such a world for such a faith. And if you can still say that this of which I have spoken is your religion, ask yourself this question: what are you doing with it? A. Powell Davies didn't mince words. He was passionately and powerfully committed to his religion, the religion of Unitarianism. This was before the Unitarians and the Universalists consolidated in 1961. He knew that for us to have an impact in the world and to be a meaningful partner in any kind of religious or interfaith dialogue, we had to claim our power as a religious movement. And he was unapologetic about it. He did not say, for example, as I have heard some contemporary Unitarian Universalists say, well, we're not really religion, we're sort of religion light. He claimed religion as a powerful and positive force and defined what he understood it to be. Now, it's no wonder that many of us are uncomfortable with that label, religion. Many of us have experienced religion as restrictive, or disrespectful, or oppressive. Even those of us who have not personally had bad experiences with religion so easily associate it with a set of specific doctrines and beliefs that may not be relevant to us, that it can become hard to imagine religion as meaning something bigger than that. But religion is much bigger than a set of prescribed beliefs. I've been a Unitarian Universalist all my life, and I don't mind saying that's 52 years now. And my beliefs about God and human nature and the universe and the meaning of life have changed dramatically over those 52 years, as I expect yours have too. During parts of my journey, I have been fiercely atheistic. At other times, I've considered myself more of an agnostic. Over the past 10 or 15 years, I have found myself, much to my own surprise, embracing a progressive Christianity and a great love of Jesus. Through all those different perspectives, however, atheism, agnosticism, then I went through a phase I called vaguely ambivalent theism, and eventually found my way to progressive Christianity. But through all of those stages, I considered myself a religious person. I never questioned that I was a religious person, even in the depths of my fiercest atheism. You may not choose to claim the word religion as a positive word in your lexicon. It's not my goal to convince you of anything. But I am a religious leader in a religious movement, and if I don't have a positive understanding of the word religion, I'm in trouble. So this morning, I want to lay out for you what I understand religious to be, within the context of our liberal religious tradition of Unitarian Universalism, and then invite you to think more deeply about your own understandings. I said earlier that the word spirituality tends to imply the more individual personal journey, while religion tends to describe a more collective experience. But let me add that the two are in no way mutually exclusive. It is entirely possible to be spiritual and religious. Now, some of my own spiritual life takes place completely outside of the realm of any kind of organized religion. Moments of meditation, certain kinds of reading that I do, singing along with music that speaks to my heart, sitting on a rock and watching the ocean change, those can all be spiritual experiences. But much of my spiritual life takes place within the context of a religious organization. I mentioned singing as a spiritual practice, but for me, the most powerful way to pray is to sing, and specifically to sing harmony. You can't do that by yourself. Singing hymns in harmony with a community of people is, for me, a profoundly spiritual experience that can only take place within a religious community. When I go to the deep places in myself to write a sermon, or when I am taken to the deep places by someone else's sermon, when I participate in a community that encourages my transformation, that inspires me to greater service, and then provides me with opportunities to serve. Much of what I need to be authentic in my personal spiritual life comes to me through my involvement with religious community. So for me, the fact that I have a religion, Unitarian Universalism, gives me a home, a framework, and a community within which I can then deepen and explore my spirituality. I certainly accept that not all people need a religious framework within which to do those things, but I think many of us do. I think that's part of what calls us together. The religious scholar Houston Smith once said that religion gives traction to spirituality. Religion gives traction to spirituality. I love that image. And the example that comes to mind most vividly for me, and I think about it always in the fall, are the Jewish High Holy Days, which were early this year, so they've been some time past now. But during that period of time, from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, there is this expectation within Judaism that you put your internal spiritual house in order. It's a time for self-examination, for reflection on the year past, for thinking about where you may have relationships that are not in harmony, where you may have wronged someone or felt wronged, who you need to forgive, and of whom you need to ask forgiveness. The understanding is you can't go to God and get right with God until you've gotten right with your fellow human beings. That step comes first. Now, we all know these are good things to do, right? We all know that we should apologize to people when we hurt their feelings. We should mend broken relationships. We should seek harmony with our fellow human beings. But how many of us remember and are disciplined enough to get around to it on a daily basis all the time? If you're like me, you need a deadline to accomplish these great spiritual practices that should just be part of our life day to day. But the structure of a religion provides opportunities within the year where these expectations are built in for us, reminding us of the importance of doing the right thing. So religion both challenges and supports us in our efforts to live as our best selves, the way we'd like to live but sometimes need a little nudging. It takes our spiritual impulses and gives them traction, lets them really get going. So I've begun by suggesting that spirituality and religion are two sides of the same coin, one more individual, one more structured and communal. Even if we accept that distinction, there are certainly plenty of people who don't consider Unitarian Universalism a religion, primarily because we don't have a common set of beliefs, and we don't require a belief in God. And as I said earlier, this idea of religion is so linked in most people's minds to doctrine and creed that the idea of a religion without a doctrine or a creed or an expectation of a belief in God seems a contradiction. So what makes us a religion? What are the characteristics of religion? I know that most of those dictionary definitions start off by talking about God. Then they go on to include a broader understanding having to do with a system of beliefs and practices and ethical values that are not necessarily theistic. And on one website, I found a description that I liked very much. On the Ancient Sites website, they said, religare is the Latin word for to reconnect, to bind together, which gave origin to the word religion. Attempts to define religion are manifold and various, but for the time being, we will just say that religion is at the heart of an ancient human longing for meaning and oneness, inspiring both the civil and the spiritual life. Religion is at the heart of an ancient human longing for meaning and oneness, inspiring both the civil and the spiritual life. Now, some of my colleagues have come up with beautifully succinct little definitions for religion. The late Forrest Church, who was for many years the minister of All Souls Unitarian Church in New York City, said that religion is our human response to the dual reality of being alive and having to die. Religion is our human response to the dual reality of being alive and having to die. Galen Gingrich, who is now the senior minister at All Souls in New York, said, in my view, religion is constituted by two distinct but related impulses, a sense of awe and a sense of obligation. Awe and obligation. I'll come back to that one. I haven't pinned it down quite as succinctly as either of those. Both Forrest Church and Galen Gingrich have been widely acknowledged as being among the most articulate and deep-thinking contemporary theologians of our UU movement, so I don't try to compete with them when it comes to language. But I do have my own set of themes that I consider fundamental to what it means to be religious. Of course, any one of these themes could be a sermon of its own. And of course, there's overlap among the different themes, but each has its own characteristics. And as I played with them, I felt that one seemed to flow naturally into the next. So one element of religious life is the choice to come together in an intentional, covenantal community. Of course, there are lots of communities that are not religious in nature, and most of us are involved in at least a few of those. But our religious communities are bound together in a different way. We're bound together by our covenant, the promises we make about how we will be with one another, in a way that secular communities usually are not. So that understanding of covenantal community, intentional covenantal community, is one thing that I believe makes us religious. Being religious involves living with reverence and gratitude. Reverence for life was the cornerstone of Albert Schweitzer's life and work. It's that experience of standing in awe before the beauty and complexity, and sometimes before the pain and the sorrow of our human experience. It requires awareness, and it evokes our gratitude. And that ability to live with reverence, to stand in awe, doesn't hinge on a belief in God. You can be reverent whether you believe in God or not. You can be struck by awe in the face of the beauty of the world, no matter what you understand its origin to be. It's a reaction that's equally accessible to theists, to humanists, to people of all religious backgrounds. It's a universal human response, one that can unite rather than divide people of different faiths. And then through that response of reverence to our world, we begin to experience another piece of what I think is important about being religious. And that's a connection to something larger than ourselves. Some of us use the language of God or spirit to describe that larger reality. For others, it has to do with experiencing our place in the cosmos, the vast and complex natural world in which we live. For still others, the emphasis may be on the deep connections among human beings and the communities that we form together. But however we feel and name it, an important dimension of religion is the realization that it's not all about us, that we're part of something astonishing that is much, much bigger than we are. And religion at its best helps us to experience and appreciate that connection and try to understand our place in it. Religion also calls upon us to cultivate compassion. The religious historian Karen Armstrong has argued that compassion is the common ground among all the religions of the world. And like reverence, it's a universal human response, born out of our experience of connectedness to that larger reality, our experience of common humanity within that larger reality. And then, if we have really experienced reverence and connection and compassion, then we are led naturally to a desire for service. Because religion can't only be about looking inward, it also has to be about looking outward, seeking to transform the world. And so I come back here to Galen Gingrich's words. In my view, religion is constituted by two distinct but related impulses, a sense of awe and a sense of obligation. The awe, I think, is what I have called reverence. We experience that and all it brings to us fully. And the gratitude that we experience in response to that sense of reverence causes us to begin to understand our obligation to contribute, to give back, to serve others, to preserve and improve this astonishing world in which we find ourselves. And finally, I also believe that religion is about breaking down barriers. It's so easy to see the way that religion puts up barriers between people in our contemporary world. It draws lines in the sand to define who belongs and who doesn't, who's saved and who's not. But religion at its best is about reaching across those boundaries, seeking to know and understand those who are different from us. Jesus crossed boundaries all the time. He was all about reaching out to the people that no one else would reach out to. And I just want to tell you a very quick story. In addition to being a Unitarian Universalist, I am also a member of an unusually liberal Mennonite community near my home. And you want to talk about singing hymns in harmony. Boy, do the Mennonites sing. Part of what drew me in. But our pastor a number of weeks ago was preaching about our tendency to judge instead of celebrate when we look at other people. And it would be a lot of backstory to give all of the context, but he gave an illustration. He said, so the next time you're at a party and you're kind of sitting around the edges feeling sort of smug and self-righteous because the people on the dance floor are making such fools out of themselves, just remember that it would probably be Jesus out there who had kicked off his sandals and with his robes flapping would be leading the conga line. And I can't get that image out of my mind. I'm not sure what to do with it, but I can't get it out of my mind. Because this element of reaching across the boundaries and breaking down the barriers is sometimes neglected in other religious traditions, I think we have a particular responsibility to lift it up, to celebrate and promote the ideals of inclusion and acceptance, of reaching out and seeking to understand and appreciate those we experience as different from ourselves. So I believe that all religions should seek to do or experience these things, to be in community, to live with reverence, to cultivate compassion, to feel our connection with a larger reality, to serve others, and to break down barriers between people. I believe that religion at its best is about all those things. And yet I also acknowledge that religion is often not at its best, including ours. So I want to close by repeating the challenge that A. Powell Davies expressed so eloquently in his sermon. As you have listened to me, have you thought perchance that this is your religion? If you have, do not congratulate yourself. Stop long enough to recollect the miseries of the world you live in, the fearful cruelties, the enmities, the hate, the bitter prejudices, the need of such a world for such a faith. And if you can still say that this of which I have spoken is your religion, ask yourself this question: what are you doing with it?
Our closing words are from early Unitarian minister Theodore Parker. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, words of love. Its profession of faith, divine living.